The production of this video was made possible by donors to the Orchestration Online Patreon initiative. Please consider adding your support to the creation of free educational internet resources by visiting our Patreon page linked below. Interesting score, Peter, and a really great way to start this particular group of evaluations for website subscribers for the 2023 Orchestration Challenge. So, yeah, I mean, I know I keep saying that, but I keep getting these real cool, unusual, just very highly individual takes on the source material. And I mean, there's a lot here that I could help you with fixing and so on. And one of those things is just maybe some basic some basic proofing. Like, for instance, like right in here, I think that you got one or two wrong notes. And then let's see, there was another. Yeah, like right in here. Shouldn't this be a B natural right in here? Right? It's the whole point of this is to work, like the dissonance sort of works from the B natural to the B flat, right? It's sort of seems to lead from kind of outwards from the in the piano part anyways, from the sounding B natural going to B flat and then C on either side, right? So you just have that little bite there on the B natural. So yeah, so there are a few things that you probably could have proofread a little bit better. Wow, that one will go in my Hall of Fame. But let's jump back to the beginning and let's frame all of these, all of this critique in the form of looking at my evaluation criteria, which we just saw at the beginning of this video. Okay, so you start off with everything sort of beautifully stated in this string scoring here. And, it wouldn't have hurt you at all to start with middle C in your first violins as well, right? And then sort of gone outwards from there. Now, I noticed that you have very few slurs, if any, on your string parts, okay? Maybe you need a little bit of advice on how to do that and how to set that up. I can help you with that. But yeah, like here, I would definitely add middle C. It doesn't matter that both of these instruments would share this, right? But the crescendo here should be matched in all instruments. It should happen at the same time with all of these upper strings here. Now, as regards to the rest of your score, you don't really tell us how many of these flutes and clarinets and bassoons and so on, and horns, trumpets, are involved. Like, for instance, here you say trumpets in B flat, but I'm only seeing a single line here. And then here you say horns in F. Well, I guess that's 2 per line, right? So 2 per staff, I should say. Right, so it's 4 horns in F, so you should mark that here. And then here, bassoons well, we only have a single line here. And then here, clarinets, we have just a little tiny bit of clarinet there and a tiny bit of oboe. And then this leads to oboes and flutes working together. But, I mean, how many of each are playing? Is this intended to be 2 flutes playing? In that case, it should be marked A2, right? So A2, right? So with 2. So yes, I mean, that's a minor quibble, but it is something you should be thinking about. Now, another thing to look at is how the winds sort of emerge from the string parts, and you give the turn, da 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 da, to the oboe and clarinet. Let's assume that this is just a single part in each instrument, right? So it's not 2 oboes, it's not 2 clarinets, it's just clarinet and oboe number 1 each, right? So number 1 period, number 1 period. You have to mark which person is playing, right? Never write, like A1, right? So that's not a thing, right? So just write number 1 period, right? Okay. So here's where I would also add slurs. I would go dum, and then another slur, da da, right? So maybe 1 slur over this, and then 1 slur over this first half of this beam group here. Or you could go ta 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 ta, right? That also works. And I like your slower tempo here, really nice. Yeah, but I mean, shouldn't the crescendo marks match? Right? Is there a little bit of diminuendo at the end? Couldn't the first violins have helped out here a little bit? Just like they could have played along with the oboes and the clarinets, or they could have just come together at the end and cushioned this sounding C, right? It just feels a little unnatural that they drop out, and this feels unnatural too. See, you are looking at the right hand in the 4th bar, and you're noticing that F, and you're thinking, well, Beethoven only scored it for an 1/8, the value of an 1/8, right? Therefore, I will only score it for the value of an 1/8. But seriously, have you listened to the way that pianists play this and how they hold that pitch all the way to the end? It's very important not to just follow the notes of the score. You must listen to how people perform it and what are the things that are built into the performance, right? In this case, I don't know of any pianist that lets go of this F, right? It just lasts, and these Fs last, and so you have this stack of 3, like a triple octave of Fs, and then you have the little melody on top. And I'll also hear some pianists hold on to this sounding A, right? Da da, so they hold on to the A, and then this comes in da da dum, so you have this F continuing on, and then the A right here and the C, so that makes a nice triad, very simple, right? So really listen to the way that all of these parts are played. Now, one last thing is that you really should have slurs over your strings to make them smoother, right? So I would suggest something like down, up, down, right? So the slur across from here to here. Then up, down, up, right? Now, I'm not saying to actually put in bow marks. I'm just saying to, like, when I'm trying to get you to think in terms of up and down with the bowings, right? So this will definitely be a down bow. When we put a slur from here to there, that makes the whole second half of the bar an up bow, right? And then if we slur from there to there, that's a down bow, and then here's an up bow, and so on. That's what I mean to say, okay? So the whole question is, like, does this intro set the mood effectively? And I feel that it actually does. I think that you do a really good job. I think, like, your conception of what's going on here is very nice. I mean, it just, like, you sort of lack a little bit of craft and polish in terms of, like, getting your proportions together and so on. Now, I see absolutely no reason for you to crescendo into mezzo forte. Da 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 da. I think you can just start off at mezzo forte, right? And just make everything mezzo forte, or mezzo piano is just really not quite enough here. And don't always just give the melody instruments a louder dynamic. Give everybody the same dynamic, and the natural tendency upper instruments to speak out will just come through, right? There's no need for you to mix your dynamics like this. It's like treating it like a mixing board. Have everybody be the same dynamic, okay? So the way that you got your slurs, just to stick with slurs, so probably most string players would bow this as an up bow. So they would go up, down, right? And then the way that you got to score to just down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. So I mean, it just makes it very, very, just what I think the word choppy is the wrong term to use here. It just feels a little obvious. Do you know what I mean? So there are ways of, like, maybe you could slur each half bar, right? You could have a slur here and then a slur there, and a slur here and a slur there, and maybe just slur all of these notes together, right? And you get a beautifully smooth sound. Now, all of these suggestions that I'm giving to you, you could just put into a new file. Just take your old file, make a copy of it, and just make a new file with Thomas's suggestions, and add some of these to it, and then just see if it feels right to you. Okay. Now, along with this, with these notes that are flowing from one to the next, all of these melodic intervals, you have notes which repeat, right? So these could be played as portato, like you could put tenuto marks over each of these notes and then group them all under one slur, or you could group them like this, slur to slur, and that way you get this this sort of lift, right? Same thing here with these repeated C's. Now, the big problem here, though, is not really the way that this is slurred and so on. The problem here is the way that you're using your double basses in a very an incredibly active way. Like, this really is a cello part, what you've scored here, right? This is similar to what a cello would play, right? Now, there's no need for the cellos to play this C. It's already being played by the violas, right? So that's like not even needed. So you could just have your cellos have an eighth rest here, and then come in and just start playing these notes here, right? All the way to here. And then these C's here, and then a B flat, could be played by your double bass, right? So your double bass could just go F, C, 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 B flat, right? So I would just say swap these parts here and get rid of this middle C, right? So just start your cello part on this F, right, which would be right here, and then have your double bass take over this part in here. Okay, and then your cellos can just keep going on their merry way. Now, whether or not you decide to slur this, right, into beam groups, or whether or not you decide to have it like nice and staccato or even pizzicato, I don't know, but like you should just do something a little differently here, and then just really check out, try to proofread a little bit better. This C is supposed to be a B flat. This B flat is supposed to be an A, right? And you can do all of that just by listening to your mock-up. And I mean, when you listen to your mock-up, this didn't strike you as being wrong, right? Or did you maybe kind of hear that something was wrong and you weren't quite sure? So just check against the original score if you can. Okay, so if you do those changes, then I could say that your melody started with elegance, that there was natural transition to octaves doesn't really come into it because you're deciding to do the whole thing in octaves already, right? So you're there, so that's not a concern. And then expanding without clogging up, that would just be part of there isn't really a big expansion, it's just what it is, right? It's sort of taking out the violas in there, and I think that you could probably find a role for them in a way that brought this all together a little bit more and didn't like drop the center out of it, right? And then I could say expanding without clogging up. Okay, so now we're moving to the leggermente section. So do we have a contrast with a theme, right? That's one of my criteria. Well, you sort of do and you sort of don't, right? So like you've already had this big, beautiful flowing line here in your violins, right? And here you've decided that you want to double the violin part with this flute part here. So it is completely unnecessary, once again, to mark these at different volumes, right? At different volumes, at different dynamics. So I just don't think you need to even mark mezzo forte there or anything, right? Because you might be worried that the flutes will get outplayed by the violins, but whatever happens here, it will definitely be a combination of tones. It'll be a blended tone no matter what you do, right? And you could say "a due" here with the flutes and say, "Oh, well, I want two flutes on this," and so on, and you will still get that blended sound. Now, it's really hard, since you've left out so many slurs, except for like just one or two here and there. It's really hard to tell what you really intend here. Do you want ta ta ta, or do you want ta 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 ta, right? Or taka 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 ta, if the flute player was double tonguing. And I like the octaves here and the oboes, and the oboe and flute is beautiful. It's really nicely placed, the way that this all works, and just a little bit more violin on top, and that just evens things out. It's nice. I'm just a little concerned here that, like, as the flute climbs, you choose to double the oboes below, right? So I'm not so sure what the continuity of this is, right? How does this... what you're going to end up getting here is like a fatter oboes, right? Or oboes kind of disappearing in their individuality and the flute popping out above, but possibly getting absorbed by the resonance of the violins. So I would say that this, like, while this is nicely scored, this is a little bit more risky for the sound of the flute, unless the flute part was marked solo, right? So, and marking this mezzo forte won't matter at all. It'll still absorb the sound of the flute when combined with the oboes. And you should really finish your phrases in your violins, okay? But this is nice. Bassoons, it's really weighty to put the contrabassoon on the bottom there, but I'm not going to tell you not to do it, right? But you just have to judge for yourself whether or not that weight is appropriate, and whether or not the players can really pinpoint, get with pinpoint accuracy that ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, right? They really kind of get that working together closely. Seeing as how you really only have one bassoon part, right, and one contrabassoon part. This could just be like two players who are used to playing together and are, they can totally work together and so on. This is sort of strange, isn't it? How this double bar here didn't really line up. I wonder if in the course of putting it together, or maybe it has something to do with the fact that this isn't two separate rests, or I don't know. It's very strange. Okay, so it could be one of those music XML errors. Okay, so now we're going to the next part here, and like mezzo, like this is just right. Okay, so look, once again, I feel you have given a cello part to the double basses, right? It's just very, very high scoring for your double basses. And they can play all of this stuff, but like, can they play it as smoothly and as in the most optimum register if, compared to the same exact notes at pitch for cellos? I don't think so. Okay. So for instance, like right in here, this is fine with the way that you've scored everything else, but all of this stuff in here, I would give to the cellos, except for like maybe this C here. So maybe both the cello and the double basses could come in together with a unison on this. Da 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 dum bum, and this is fine. Da da dum, and this should resolve, right? Da 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 dum in the cellos, right? And then here you just have an F in the bass with your basses, right? And this is really rather neat. The sort of trembling kind of da 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 da. So you realize that just a double beam is a double beam tremolo is a measured tremolo, right? This means to play sixteenths, right, rather than like the sort of shivering unmeasured tremolo that just is right. Okay, so I'm just asking, I'm checking to see that is right, because there really isn't a whole lot about this that, there isn't anything that necessarily makes measured tremolo an urgent kind of way of scoring this, right? I mean, it could work fine. This is why you should always, by the way, whenever you run into measured tremolo, you should always just write out the first beat, right? So that would leave me in no doubt as a score reader if I saw 4/16 notes in a row under one beam group, and then the rest of it just all in this kind of abbreviation, then I know for sure, and so does the player, right? Now here you were saying, okay, well, you're just dropping a really long slur onto this, but shouldn't, like, if you're going to go crescendo into this, and I don't understand this diminuendo here, right? Because you're pushing towards this forte, so why does this go diminuendo and this doesn't, right? These are the same exact pitches, right? I just don't understand. So shouldn't this be like, da da da, right? So like one slur over this, so for the up bow, and then a slur over this for the down bow, and a slur over this for the up bow, and the same thing here, like slur down bow, slur up bow, and then just have this part finish. Da 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 da. Stop on an F, and then just let the horns take over. Bum bum bum. Right, so they will fold the string parts before right into what's happening. So I mean, if you fix some of those things, then I could say you had an emphatic color of line. You could have beefed it up a little bit more with maybe clarinet or something. Would work really, really well. You could have filled in the harmonic density here a little bit better. You could have even had an octave right in here. Like, you're very fond of octaves there, so octaves would have worked here as well. So say this part being given to the second violins below, and then this part an octave higher, and then even having like flute reinforce the top octave and clarinet reinforcing the lower octave, and just having them come to an end. But I mean, having said that, I realize that your intention here is that the horns really take over, and if there are notes hanging over on top in these higher parts, then that doesn't really serve that very well. Here I would say that this is sort of a wasted chance here. You started off with the bassoons, da-da-da-dum, right? And why can't the bassoon continue to support what's going on in the cellos, right? For instance, and just make this a little bit firmer. Yeah, I mean, it would give it a much better bottom end to the horns in here and the trumpets. Okay, well, I feel this is pretty nicely scored in here. No big problems with that. I would avoid doubling inner lines like this in your horns, and instead double the top line, right? So it would better to have this part up here be first horn, just like you've written it, and then instead of having the third horn double the second horn, have it double the first horn, right? And then all that together is perfectly fine with the addition of the trumpets. Like, you might have been thinking, oh, well, the trumpet is already doubling this and so on. So I don't want to make it too firm. No, I mean, it's better for you to either double the top line or the bottom line. So, right, if you double the top line, you get a more emphatic melody, and if you double the bottom line, you get horn sounds that don't drop off in their lower, kind of lower or middle register. So it's just it's sort of a judgment call, I guess. But yeah, this isn't too bad. Yeah. But anyway, it has a nice sound in the mock-up, right? That's not too bad. Yeah, and I mean, if you're going to have this real low contrabassoon writing in here, it should be the same thing. Like, you should have some kind of, yeah. I mean, just the way that this is scored, it's very weak, because the contrabassoon should be doubled with this kind of intensity. Contrabassoon should be doubled by the double basses, and then this part, as I said before, should be played by the cellos. The cellos doubled by the bassoons here, right? And just keep the bassoon part going, doubling the double basses. And you could even, you could have even brought in contrabassoon earlier too. So anyhow, yeah, and then this leads into this part here, which is all good fun. So, anyways, I mean, yeah, like there are a lot of little fixes and little tweaks that I'm suggesting here, and I know I'm going really fast with this one, but I'm noticing that some of my evaluations recently have sort of dragged on and dithered a bit, so I want it to be a little bit more focused in this video, and hopefully I won't run into too many things that knock me for a loop. But as I said before, I felt this was a really great way to start this group of this compilation of evaluations, and I really enjoyed it, Peter. So yeah, so look, I feel that this is an early effort for you in terms of your orchestration, your orchestration efforts, and I think it's a really good one. I think that you should continue to enter these orchestration challenges, and especially next year. That type of music might be more up your alley in terms of stimulating your imagination and causing you to explore different, perhaps fresher, more contemporary approaches, okay? So thank you so much for your entry and for being a part of this, and I would love to hear your thoughts on some of the other entries in this group of scores in this video. Now, let's take a look at the next one. Now that is strikingly original, Dr. Yeah, this is this is just so much fun. I love the cello solo at the beginning, and then our the a little obad here by your wind section, bringing in the strings, pushing toward the brass section break right in here. Yeah, so much fun. I think that the timpani plus the bass drum is pretty immense. I don't think you really need that much punctuation at the bottom. It just it feels really like you're pounding the listener over the head. But I mean, if that's the intention, then that's fair. Well, let's jump back to the beginning here. I felt that your cello solo could have been a little bit more out front. Like, if we're saying solo cello, I mean, I think you could have had like espressivo. You should show us what that means. Does it mean pushing towards this high note here? Like with crescendo, perhaps maybe a little bit of fermate at the end, and then just like easing out of it a little bit past there. So yeah, I mean, I like the way that you nicely supported everything, and I love the key change to D major. That's really, really fun. Yeah, there's just so many great little elements here that add up to a very original overall take. So, sorry, I keep trying to turn off the volume here, and it keeps turning back on again. I can think I keep bumping the volume key or the mute key on my laptop as I'm doing things. Yeah, and just so far as this is concerned here, this bass drum pianissimo, I mean, that's fine. If you're going to try to get a little bit of support here to the punctuation of your double basses, then I would think that a low F on the timpani would actually be better, because the kettles will have a better ring to them. They'll have that kind of that nice bouncy sound, and which will support the it'll support the a low D on the timpani, which will support this this sound a lot better. It could even be D in the middle, right? But just soft, right? Alrighty. Okay. The bowing here is fine. Why doesn't it match all parts, right? Like, why isn't, why do you have like one long bow here when you're bowing over repeated notes, right? Shouldn't the slur start here in the middle of the bar, so it's down, up, down, up, down, up, down, right? See, that makes more sense than this long. Like, in order to make all of this work, the players would have to start on an up bow, and it was just a little strange, right? So there's a better way of doing this. And I think the solo part could go piano espressivo. Not that I want you to do a lot of dynamic mixing here, but I feel that the player should be in the middle of that universe of sound, right? We sort of have these two different worlds. We have the piano side and we have the forte side, right? So the piano, like if the player starts off sort of in the middle of their choice sound, choice restrained sound, rather than like too far off to the side in playing like extremely softly, then I think that they are better able to make it more expressive, right? So that's not my attempt to mix this or anything like that. These lower players could be playing piano or pianissimo. It doesn't really matter. Okay, you still get that. Is what you want down here is this beautiful cushioned sound. All right, so does that set the mood effectively? I think it does. It doesn't really, like, what you've got here doesn't necessarily set up anything in terms of like timbre to be expected, but it's so different, right? You're going straight from the strings to the winds, that I feel like, you have it's the expression rather than the timbre, right, that is setting things up. So you just have this really beautifully emotional statement here, and then you go to this, a little bit more chirpy kind of playing here, like just kind of bright and breezy sort of scoring with your winds. And here you have chosen to just like drop a big slur onto this. I would tie this A right here, right, rather than having the player slur two pitches that are, it's the same pitch, right? So like, try not to throw a slur over the same pitch played 2 times in a row, 3 times in a row, unless it's portato or something like that. I mean, you can do it to get a legato sound, but I just feel it's, it shows a little bit of perhaps forgetfulness, want of care, something like that. I think it would work out better if these were tied right in here, is all I'm saying. And this is nice right in here. All the same. The second flute part in here is really not very strong or radiant compared to what you've got going on here in your clarinets and bassoons. What if this second flute part was actually the second flute part was actually an oboe part, right? Then I think you'd get way better balance here, rather than pushing your second flute so low, right? And then your second flute can come in here a lot brighter and more relaxed. So adding all those things together, what's my estimation of this? Does the melody start with elegance? Yes, absolutely, with that first flute solo right in there. Is there a natural flow? I think you managed that really nicely without things getting too acrobatic, too jumpy in your bassoons. And is there, do you expand without clogging up? I think so. I think actually, if anything, you need a little bit more timbral weight in the middle here, not second flute, but perhaps first bassoon. First oboe. I keep saying bassoon. First oboe right in there. So, natural transition to octaves, you handled that very well. And as I said before, the oboe will support the flute above much better than the clarinets, the way that you've got them scored in here. The clarinet's just basically going to swallow the sound of the flute there. the second flute. All right, so now here you go to the bringing the strings back in, and the the violins here are pretty much going to absorb the sound of the second flute right here, right? But it's a good coloristic tool, right? That second flute right in here, so it's not wasted, and I actually like the role of the second taking this, so that the first can sort of chirp above alongside, or like in a double octave with the bassoons and violas. So that sets up a really nice contrast between the different lines, the different bits of motive, sort of chuckling back and forth a little bit. And I also like the harmonic support that you build in right here with your oboes and second bassoon and so on, and the strings. So you're doubling all of these pitches more or less. Some of them at an octave below here with the second oboe and so on. There will be a tendency of this second oboe to really play out quite a bit, right? I mean, this would be better off as a clarinet part if you really wanted to have it controlled a little bit. But it's not impossible. It's totally doable. It's just not as subtle as you might think. But the genius of this, I'm not calling you a genius or anything. You know you're a genius. That's fine. You don't need me to tell you. The really great part about this is how you use that developing density to push forwards, right? Just very naturally into these triplets coming up here. Okay, and this is quite clever. I thought that you start off unified with first violins and flute, and then the first violins are allowed to continue their full melodic arc, whereas you have your first flutes come in and play at an octave above, where they will be absorbed into the sound of the first violins, right? So it all works out really nicely. And because you have the continuity from before, it all feels like it is just like that. This idea isn't being followed by another idea, but that it leads right into it, and it's all part of the same expression, right? In a very natural way. And this is just really great writing right in here. This is nice. It's one thing I would say is just, it's this suspension here, enclosed by the bassoons, is going to, like with the octave above, I'm not sure that that's the strongest part writing. I mean, it works in a kind of really direct, somewhat, kind of brute force Beethoven kind of a way, especially with some of his earlier decisions and some of his earlier scoring. But I would say that it's still, like maybe the cello should be supporting the bassoons and stuff rather than, getting into too much of that enclosed writing right in there. Yeah. See, because like like you're lessening the... Yeah, it's just, I think that this could be written a little bit better in this staff here. And I think the clarinet could play a little bit more of a role in here. So, yeah. And then there's also the question of like whether or not your poor solo cello player is going to rejoin the cello's tutti, right? So, that might be something you might want to mark here, right? And then you could just cut this part out in a normal vertical score rather than this landscape format. You wouldn't even have the solo cello on the next page, right? You would just assume that it had rejoined, right? Okay. All right, but main thing I'm trying to say is you do have a nice emphatic color of line. You've already set up your harmonic density. I think that all works great. And then you lead right into this section here, and not too high, right? I thought that was beautiful as well. This D is leading right to this D here. This D will be absorbed right into the brightness of the first trumpet. And then you just basically have some pretty straightforward brass scoring right in here. Once again, I feel the bass drum is just huge overkill. You could probably just completely cut the bass drum part, give these pitches to a low D on your, or just a D in the staff in your timpani, and then I think you just have enough force. You have the kind of force that you need. And, and this is, you could have even done like sort of, maybe sort of like simulated kind of back and forth kinds of effects, like maybe the alternating bars could be just like lower brass or something, or you could have had a little bit of variety between these bars, but I think that it works fine the way that it is. Okay, so really nice work. Yeah, I think that if you had decided to continue on here and had gone into the B section and so on, you would have had to have more variety in this brass scoring here. All right. One thing I want you to think about is that I believe it was Gordon Jacob who was sort of, he had an issue. I don't know if I think it was Gordon Jacob. He had an issue with his orchestration students, or orchestrators in general, scoring a part that was like all in one section of the orchestra, then all in another section of the orchestra, and then just like the going back and forth between sections over and over again without the sections working together, right? That was sort of his problem, and I don't really see that so much in today's scoring, but it's enough that he complained about it back then to tell us that it was an issue back then, right? So maybe he was getting, something where there would just be a lot of jumping back and forth between the sections, but very little full orchestration, possibly because of anxiety from the orchestrators. So I want you to not feel anxious about that. I want you to feel confident, in shaping nice big colors where everybody works together. Now, I'm not saying that your score has a flaw because you're going back and forth between different sections. Not at all, because there are very few of the entries so far have had this character to it, right? But I'm just saying, don't, think about the approach that you took here as something that really worked in an original way for this entry. But then next time you do something else, maybe enter the next year's orchestration challenge, or do your own scoring on your own original work, or perhaps orchestrating somebody else's work, don't just rely on this again and again and again, right? It's great that you did it here. Watch out about getting into a pattern with it, all right? So anyhow, great score, really enjoyable. And so much fresh air being let in of the imagination in this one. Really, really enjoyed it. So let's take a look at the next score. I really like this, Tony. I mean, it's got a few problems that I think I can help you with, and there are perhaps a few misperceptions and a few bits of scoring that are a little out there. But I think, overall, it more or less holds together, okay? So let's talk about this intro. Does the intro set the mood effectively? I mean, I feel that it does in some ways, but I feel that it doesn't quite have the follow through texturally, right? So I think the mood is fine. I think the setting is fine, but I think that the scoring needs work. Okay, so you start off here with the horns in G and so on, and here you should really say first and second violins, right? Each one should have a different designation. You can't just say violins and violins, right? This should say a violina 1 and violina 2, right? So and then yeah, this is all fine right here. Okay. Now, as to horns in G, though, like the horns in G were offered to people who wanted to score in the sort of in the idiom and in the approach of Beethoven, using natural horns. But sort of judging by the way that a lot of this is scored, especially with these very very low notes here, and the general flow of this and so on, having so much responsibility to this line and the horns, I just really feel that you would be better off with a standard pair of piston horns, right? Or piston, excuse me, valve horns. So just the just standard modern valve horns on this in F, right? So you don't need to have horns in G. Okay, so that would be my first thing to fix in this. So just assuming that, here you've got your horns working together with the first violins, and then you've got the second horn, right, which is kind of, it's kind of starting off here. More or less working with the second horn here, but like there's like kind of no third part, right? There's just so I think you should go back to the way that the piano part is scored, and you should have this be like three voices, right? So it's not just two at the beginning, and then when you trade off over to oboes, I think that the transition needs to be a lot smoother, right? So like at this point, it's almost like, well, the horns are being bulked up by the violins, but then when the violins change over to oboe and so on, then the oboes blend more with the violins. And it's just like in that way, it's a little uneven. I think you could have had your horns continue on towards the end of the bar with the diminuendo, and the oboes starting at the beginning of this bar pianissimo and then pushing in, like doubling what the horns were doing, and then pushing into it, so that you had this really nice gradual fade in fade out kind of a sound. I think that would have worked better. So with that, plus with working in 3-part harmony with your with the texture here, I think you just get way better results. Right now, of course, like here we get more voices going and so on, and that all works a whole lot better as things proceed. But it just like here at the end, it feels like the texture is not as full as it could be, and part of that is because you've just dropped out all of your strings right in here, right? So like the strings start to, you never had your second violin in here, you had your viola instead, and then nothing, right? So if you rethink the string scoring here in 3-part harmony and continue it all the way to the end, you will fix a lot of those problems. So you just to boil this down one more time. Have your oboes double what the horns are doing, but fade them in from a pianissimo from the beginning here, and then have your horns fade out towards the end of the bar, right? So that you just get that nice trade-off over that. And score your strings in the same 3-part harmony that is in the right hand part. And and just like right in here, don't like I like the way that you have a continuity of the harmony in the winds, but that has to stay in the strings as well, right? Okay, so those are my thoughts about that. And you can even add more harmony if you need to, right? Parts that aren't there but are suggested, right? So like for instance, this B here could continue on, like you could have the second violins go A, B, and then just hold the B to the end, right? And then we could have a G, right? So we've got this G here in the clarinets, and that could be played by the violas. Do you see what I'm saying? So anyway, and then I think that would really fix this part up. All right, so on to the next part. So our next concern is, does the melody start with elegance? Okay, I mean, it does start with elegance, but the slurring here, as you might have heard in some of the earlier entries for this collection, this compilation of entries and previous ones, just you need to spend a little bit more time maybe watching videos of string players playing up and down bows, right? Because what you've got right here is one of the pitfalls, not pitfalls. It is one of the 12 common scoring errors in my video. Do you remember that video? Did you watch that video like it said to in the guidelines? So in that guideline, in that video, I have a caution against just dropping the slurring that occurs in the piano part onto wind and string parts, right? But just a really, like, if they fit, if they work well, then use them. But if they don't just drop them onto the parts. Like, for instance, like this lower part here in the bassoon, just to all be kind of played on one smooth breath, is just not quite as effective, right? And then here you're asking your poor first violinist to just like bow this entire thing under one bow, and then they have no slur, but then your second violins have a slur, right? It's just very strange the way that this is all organized. Then you have this divisi right in here. Shouldn't this second voice here be, or this lower C here, be second voice? And then like you solve the problems here with the way it's, and it's strange, you have like stems changing direction and so on. Yeah, it's all very unclear. But to get back to the slurring here, probably better to have this, just have a slur from the B to the C, right? So that would be the up bow, and then here down bow, like slur from the D to the G, and then slur from the F sharp to the G, so we get to an up bow again, and this is just naturally down, and then up, and then maybe slur, down, up, down, right? And then give that slurring to the second violin part here. These could be joined as portato, like say put a tenuto mark on each of these and then join them with a slur, and then you get this nice pulsing effect. And then, as far as the horn is concerned, do you really want to not have any articulation on the downbeat? Ta ta ta, or even ta 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 ta, right? Every time a slur starts, that would be the beginning of a tonguing with the player, right? Yeah, it's strange how your stems and your voices change direction. So that's something you should clean up, right? Just make your scores look better in that, right? It's just so much easier on your score reader. And I really love this trilling right in here in the flute. That's one of the best parts of this entire orchestration, is the way that you have these trills here, sort of tracking from above. So, my estimation here would be, does the melody start with elegance? Yes, if you can fix the slur here and not just drop it from the piano part. Is there a natural flow here? I think it is very nicely done, very nicely managed. Maybe the double bass could come in a little earlier with pizzicato, and then arco, which is, just to kind of punctuate the G's the way they are in the piano part. And then is there a natural transition to octaves? Yeah, pretty much. And I really love this beautiful G horn solo, which once again could just be written in F, like a F horn, no key signature needed. Does it expand without clogging up? I mean, this bassoon part is just really a little bit on the edge there. But I would say leave it alone. Try some of the other changes and then think about that, all right? Okay, and that takes us to the leggermente section, okay? Now, it's kind of strange. You go da ta 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 ta, and then da ta ta ta, da ta 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 ta, and then da ta ta ta. It's kind of fun. and then you have a little bit of harmonic support on the downbeat of each bar, right? Yeah, what if you put the harmonic support at the end of the phrase, right? Da 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 pluck. Da 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 pluck. Right? As opposed to da 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 pluck da 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 pluck da 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 da. I mean, this just feels a little regular, right? Yeah, but I mean, as far as like contrast with a theme, it's nice because like the oboe is a solo voice that we have not heard from since the intro, right? So all of this beautiful, cushiony, mellifluous sort of wind writing, especially with the mock-up that you're using, that has its own identity, and then the oboe is like a new contrast, right? And then, then bassoon answering clarinets, and then bassoon answering. I think that works really nicely, and the pizzicato, wherever you put it, is really nice. Now, we're going to this next part, and do you really want everything to be enunciated individually? Do you really want ta 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 ta, or down up down up down up down up down up, right? Z z z z z, or do you want da da da, right? So in other words, slur slur slur, right? So think about these things. Yeah, and then like, what is the dynamic? Who is playing what when? Right? We go up here back to the first page. 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, 2 bassoons. Okay, who's that? Which oboe player is that? Which bassoonist is this? Okay, and then when we get to the next page, which horn player is that? I mean, we could assume that it's the first, but we shouldn't assume anything. You should indicate who that is. Is this the first the first horn player? Is this the first bassoonist? Is this the first clarinetist and the first flute player? And then when this comes in, is it 1 or 2 players, right? If you get 2 players, you get like more of that breathy sound, a little bit more edge to the sound. Same thing here with the oboes. Like if the oboe is doubled, then it has a kind of a slightly trumpet type of a sound, right? If clarinets are doubled, they have a kind of a phased sound. Or if these are intended to be individual instruments, we need to know, right? And we also need to know what dynamic everything is. This is P, and that's it. And where are the rest of the dynamic markings? We don't get any till here, right? So these parts should all be marked piano, right? Maybe. I don't know. And then here, like, is this mezzo forte maybe, or mezzo piano, or pianissimo? What direction are you taking us dynamically? And then here, we have a crescendo, and the crescendo is definitely making this bigger. How big of a crescendo is this? Is this taking us up to mezzo forte, so that when we get to here, it is a sudden drop in dynamic strength? And if that's so, shouldn't we mark this piano subito, right? I mean, you don't really need to say subito in a score that is intended to be played in the early 19th century style, but you cannot count on your score being played by period performance specialists, right? It'll be probably read by, who knows, a community orchestra, semi-pro, maybe a decent like mid-range professional orchestra, right? But any of those situations, I would want to mark piano subito after a crescendo. So do you have an emphatic color of line? I'd say yes, you do, but I mean, maybe some consistency here. Like, could there be octaves here? Right? Could you have your first violins playing alongside the flute and the oboe and everything else, and sort of thickening up that higher line? Do you really want this to be slurred? Da da da. So like what if you were to put the slurs here, like go slur, 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 and then when you get here, no slurs, just go down, up, down with the bow, right? Because look at your, some of your lower parts, your bass parts, cello and double basses and bassoon. They're just going, ta, 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 right? Down, up, down. So why can't everybody do that? Right? Why can't you just have ta, ta, ta with your flute? and down, up, down with your violins, or even just this an octave higher, right? So yeah, so there just needs to be a little bit more consistency here. This is the strongest argument of them all why this should not, or possibly even could not, be a G natural horn, right? So like, excuse me, not G natural horn, but G natural horn, or natural horn in G, right? Because like these pitches are so low. I mean, this low F, right, is just kind of not really within the scope of the natural horn pitches. I mean, I think you can get it, but it's just not a very nice pitch. And the G is totally doable, but then you have B natural above, and I mean, it doesn't really seem. And then this whole, like, if you want this line to be really beautiful, perfectly smooth, it should go to a valve horn, right? So yeah, so just put this. I would say just put this in F. Have everything transpose, and maybe rethink some of your slurs. All right. So, I think that the horn does not need to give up so easily here. I think it should continue on to the end. I think that you're setting up a beautiful harmonic density going towards this tutti here. Okay. I like the way that you hold off on the trombones until we get to here. I'm not so convinced by big sound, little sound, and then continue with the little sound, right? So you have this big, full sound, and then just these, then just strings and the brass, and then da da da. I would say maybe at this point answer with the tutti, right? And just go back to this scope. Bum bum, right? So there just needs to be a little bit more contrast in between, right? And of course, like all of those plans would be dependent on how you are setting up the beginning of the next section, the B section. What instrument is going to be playing the solo, right? Da 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 da, bum bum. Or will it even be a solo? Maybe it would just be like the string sections working together. So however that would be approached would be dependent on how I would score this, right? So anyways, so those are my thoughts for this, Tony. And I thought it was just, once again, a really imaginative score. I thought you had a lot of great ideas, and, maybe just a little bit more experience with, like, setting up your score, doing some finalization, watching that list of common scoring errors, and, maybe try not to drop piano-like phrase marks onto the actual, business of breathing and bowing for your wind and string players, okay, and brass players. So, but like, it's a really good effort, and I'm especially interested now in hearing how you would take on next year's piece, which I'm not going to say what it is. I'm going to hold on to that secret until the bitter end, until my birthday next year, which is when I'll make the next announcement. We're going to have to go back to my birthday. I know I've been moving the date around. It was moved around because of Barvinsky. Sort of that needed to happen at a specific time, just to make everything else work. And then this year around had to be a little later, but next year it has to be really right on track with my birthday because of everything else that I'm doing, my traveling and other things. So anyways, I just thought this was great. And, I thought your imagination was super, and like you had some really great ideas and experiments and so on and so forth. And I hope that I've given you a little bit of guidance on how to approach that with a bit more craft. All right. So nice work. Now on to the next entry. Yop. What a lovely late birthday present you've sent me. Oh gosh, it's always so great to get a score from you, and you may have been contributing the longest out of most of our contributors, most of our participants. Yeah, it's just it's continuing this long conversation with you. So the first thing that I'm going to say, just an overall comment about articulation. I feel that if you're going to put tenuto marks here and mezzo staccato there, I think that both, like all four of these parts, need to be reconciled with the same articulation, and especially considering how you've got a touch of timpani right here. I think that all of the parts should be portato, right? Then this ends up not being so abrupt, right? It felt like the abruptness of the mezzo staccato, especially as interpreted by your mock-up, it just felt like it interrupted the smoothness of the line, which was otherwise just really beautifully scored, right? And then there was this other little thing. What was it? Yeah, it was this forte piano. I think you could have had an accented piano, right? I think that once again, it just was really abrupt and harsh, Da 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 da. What about da 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 da? Just like an accent, but not necessarily a punch in the face. Do you know what I mean? So just something that I think like as it is now, it's just very fresh and lively, and it's almost like you are showing me your wit and your sense of adventure, and I love it. But like in practical terms, like when this gets ready for for to be read or to be recorded or whatever, if that were ever your intention or something like this, I would say tone it down to just accented piano or something like that. Maybe it doesn't even need a crescendo, right? You know, just an accent mark. Alrighty, so yeah, let's to play fair. Let's talk about the evaluation criteria. Does the intro set the mood effectively? I feel it's just beautifully done, actually. Yeah, it's just no problems at all. You know, works fine for me, is what I would say. Um, yeah, I love this. The octaves here in the violin and bassoons. It's such a great touch, and then you have the middle strings sort of enclosing that to a degree until we get down to these crossings here. That just the open strings on those G's. And that just a little roll on timpani, and then the push towards mezzo forte here. I think you could push towards mezzo forte by the middle of this bar. And you could even maybe add a little bit, da 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 da, just a tiny bit of fermata perhaps, or ritardando going into the middle of the bar. I mean, if the crescendo mark ends in the middle of the bar, maybe the mezzo forte mark should be here, right? Okay, but your G scoring is pretty good. I'm just like sort of jumbling it around in my mind. Yeah, like these pitches here could have been played as open pitches on your D horns, right? Like the sounding A and F sharp, right, would be G and E, right? And it's okay to like schlep back and forth between the horns. You could have the G horns take this. You just get that kind of weird stopped pitch on the A, and then here this could go to the just like the open pitches of A and F sharp in the sounding A and F sharp, written G and E in the D horns, and then going to the octaves here, right? And then looking at this, once again, that B could be played as F sharp in the or written E in your D horns and so on. So yeah, and then even here, like this F, right? Um, yeah, this is like sounding C, right? So the that represents in D horns. Um, yeah, in D horns, this would be like a B flat, right? So I think I've got that right. So I've got a zillion things on my mind, so I might be transposing that wrong. But yeah, so like as a B flat, that's more or less an open tone. So this could have easily been done on, with more open pitches in your D horns, right? And then this is just so beautiful though, the way that this is scored. So I think that like in the main, I would say that you more or less have got some pretty decently written natural horn parts here. All right, so that's the first thing. In case people wanted to see some fairly good examples of that, I would say that these sort of like with a little bit of rewriting, trading off between certain pitches and so on, I think that you could get that. You could call this pretty well done. All right, so now just to get back to the intro and how well it hangs together, right? Once again, I like this clarinet part down here. I think that's pretty well done. Yeah. So I like the sense of syncopation and the sense of the sense of pulse and so on that we've got. I'm not sure that this does anything jumping up here with this G, but yeah. So as far as that's concerned, those are my thoughts on the intro, and I think that it's pretty damn good. All right. So now continuing on, does the melody start with elegance? I would say that it is elegant up to the point that you punch us in the face here. Reminds me a little bit of that. What is that planet in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Like where you if you step wrong, this arm sort of reaches out and slaps you in the face, like from the ground or something like that. It sort of reminded me of that right in there. But yeah, I mean, it is really lovely. I have to say, I don't think you need this mezzo forte dolce here to bring it out louder than the. I mean, I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to keep it from getting swallowed by the first violins. But like, I think you forgot to tell us how many flutes are playing here, too, right? But yeah, I don't think you need to necessarily bring this out too hotly, right? But it is nicely crafted. All of this stuff in here, like it does have a natural flow. It's beautiful, got a beautiful flow. Like, does it expand without clogging up? Just the way that you rely on these horns here, it's just gorgeous. It's just that works for me. Okay, and the support doubling, I guess, by the violas and so on. It's just and then the way that this little chorale works here in your lower winds. It's just really lovely. I have to say, I would prefer that there was a break in the bar lines here, just to so that I don't just as a score reader, so I don't misinterpret what parts belong where. And I know, it's a really tiny orchestra, so in the style of Beethoven, like you'll see a lot of scores from this period where the horns and the winds work together. But I'd say just for this period, just cut me some slack and take those out next time. All right, when you have a similar situation. All right. So natural transition. It's not so much a natural transition to octaves as it's just a natural transition to this next part. And whatever happens, I think that the phrasing should match in both parts. Okay, so I have no objections to the way that this is phrased. I think that the strings should follow that, right? With rather than just being individually bowed, right? If you're going to slur this far, you should slur that far. If you're going to do that in your clarinets, right? For instance. Okay, so this is all lovely, no problems there. I think if this is mezzo piano crescendo and back, you don't need a mezzo forte in the middle. The players will know what to do there, right? And you should give the crescendo to both sets of players in the chorale and to your at least to your upper strings. All right. Okay, so that's all great. All right, so now let's go on to the Leggermente. All right, so clarinets, or first clarinet and first flute in octaves, and nicely slurred da da da, and then bassoon answering bum 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 bum, and I like the pizzicati. All right, and then oboes da 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 da. Yeah, it's just like it's perfect. What do I need to say about it? It's great, Yop. So now, like everything I could quote all these things. Contrast with theme, yes. Contrast between lines, yes. Harmonic support needed, you added some, right? So that's great. So now here is where I think the mezzo staccato works great. Okay, but I would like if you're going to do a really effective mezzo staccato and with a crescendo and everything else, break it down into beam groups. Okay, so up down up down up, right? Rather than up down up. I mean, especially considering that like the players are going to want to push into the crescendo, and you're making them do it on a down bow, right? Which goes against the nature of that motion, right? Which is, of course, any player can compensate for that, but you're just working against their ergonomics of their instrument, right? And like some of the best scoring works with the ergonomics of the instrument, right? So in this case, I would say just by breaking it into smaller bites, because like this is going to be 3 up bows in a row, right? So 3 down bows in a row. Just make the slur match the beam group, and then make the slur match this beam group. They'll be pushing even harder here, right, with the up bows, and then right by here, shouldn't we say forte by the middle, like wherever the end of the crescendo hairpin is where you should put your forte, okay? And then why are we depriving these poor underprivileged lower strings the benefit of having their own crescendo mark, right? I mean, do you really want everybody to be? Do you want your cellos to be soft and then stay soft here, right? Or do you want everybody to crescendo together, especially when you've got your clarinets down here and they're playing along with your violas and everything else, right? I mean, just and I think you're also depriving your poor cellos of having some very natural support from your bassoons, okay? Because I mean, what is the criterion that we are trying to help along here is the sense of harmonic density setting up whatever's to happen here, whether it is soft or loud, right? So if the harmonic density increases and is nice and full and suddenly cuts out, but you're using the same instruments as before, then you just have the most beautiful sense of restraint, right? Like everybody is suddenly restrained is so much more effective than just completely, in my view, than completely changing timbre. Although I've seen some complete changes of timbre that also work great. But the setting of the harmonic density before also helped out those parts as well with the fuller scoring, right? So I'm not convinced by this. I feel it's a little, it's. With the inconsistency of slurring of these parts, right? I think if you're going to go, let's say you take my advice and you go up, down, up, down, up. Shouldn't you just go down, up, down? So like here you got down, up, down. Why don't you just do that here? Down, up, down, up, down. Toot, 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 right? And the same thing with the bassoons. Ba, 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 right? Rather than da. I mean, it's way less effective when you're slurring down like that. And then the slurring isn't even matching in all the parts, right? So just commit to it, I would say. Especially if, well, I don't know. I mean, like here you have that same mixture. I think you got to get away from that. You have to have everybody do the same articulation, the same notes, and the same thing. And especially if you are going to set everything up with a nice big mezzo staccato slur and so on, then this should just really be no more pussyfooting around. Just go bonk, bonk, bonk. Okay? And, and that also helps if you want to bring in some timpani too. Right? Anyhow, about my only caveat here would be that I think that the clarinet could be helping out right in here rather than just cutting out, because it's not going to take anything away from a sudden, chorale here with your reeds and your horns, right? And then going back to strings flute and bassoon, and then reeds and horns again. So yeah, yeah. Anyways, that's my thought about this. I love the texture and the contrast and everything here, but just once again, like, you know, I think clarinets have more of a role to play here if you can spare them. Right? It was just like a little bit of more backgroundish doubling of what's going on with the first violins and so on. But yeah, oh yeah, hell of a score. Yeah, so, I'm thinking of all of our little musical conversations together, and I just think that you are going to love next year's, as and it's going to bring out so many interesting parts of your abilities as an orchestrator. Just like this was a wonderful look back, just the wonderful way that you scored this right in here is just so powerful. And then just the perfectness of this, and then the wonderful foresight that you put into this and so on. And then the back and forth here, and, just, well, whatever. I already talked about it, right? I thought that this, whether this was your cup of tea or not, you scored it gorgeously. Okay, so great work. All right, and I will see you again next year for the next piece if I don't see you first in just around the community. But thanks for thanks for everything that you brought to these challenges. I really appreciate it. All right, on to the next score. Ah, Alexander, you're a man after my own heart. Right here at the beginning. I really love the pacing of this opening right in here. And also, there's some hidden objects in here of the molto ritardando and so on that's kind of like really drawing this out, and you have a halfway tempo in between the very slow tempo of Spencer Myer, whose recording we referenced, and the one that I put in the template of around 40. So, like the first question of in the evaluation criteria, how does this entry or how does this intro set the mood? And I feel that it does so beautifully effectively. There's a few little things in here, though. Yeah, I mean, it sounds kind of eerie the way that you have got your flute and clarinet matched up in here, and that's really kind of a special effect, right? Here you support it from an octave below with the English horn right at the same time that you bring in the piccolo, which sort of captures the overtones of the English horn. Those sort of kind of sort of like hyper. There's kind of like hyper high pitched overtones that lock into piccolo overtones from any double reed below that is tracking. I mean, I almost feel like you don't even need the clarinet here, though. Like a properly powerful flute right in here, and here you say soli. I guess soli with. You should probably mention soli with clarinet, right? Or just say solo, right? And the two players will hear each other playing, and they will know right away that they are playing soli together. But I think you should, the proper term here should really be solo, right? Because like when you say soli here, you might give the copyist or the score reader or the conductor or whatever the idea that they're meant to be two flute parts, right? That's always a kind of a danger there. So yeah, so like the point I'm trying to make here is that I feel that this could yeah, could really easily be given to a nice, powerful, properly framed flute all by itself without having to match it up with clarinet. Now, having said that, the sound is unearthly and it's really beautiful. The only thing I would point out is that like here you've got clarinet plus flute, here you've got clarinet plus flute and oboe, and here you've got clarinet once again, and here you've got clarinet plus trumpet, right? So like you're just making the clarinet do everything, right? It's just you're using it so much, right? So it um, it becomes kind of this. I'm worried that the clarinet would be a little bit of a crutch for you as a melodic instrument, and maybe it's just this particular score that sort of gave you that idea, these ideas to use the clarinet in different ways as a similar to like a bass clarinet as a kind of a fix all, an instrument that could do all the work, all the heavy lifting, all the patching up, all the little bits and pieces. All right, but I don't know. I mean, I think that the pure unadulterated sound of the flute in here probably would be more stirring, more emotionally effective, rather than like the blending it with the clarinet and so on. But I mean, it is a beautiful sound. Having said that, now if you've watched a few of my evaluations already, you may already be preparing yourself for a few comments that I'm going to make. I feel you don't need to say niente here, and you don't need to say niente here. Okay? It's perfectly fine to start from a triple P. Same thing here. Pianissimo. Yeah, so look, go watch this little video that I just released on my channel about nientes. I think it's called Niente Part 1 or something. So look, don't use niente unless it is an effect that is intended to get the audience to listen to it, right? That you are absolutely telling the audience, I am coming from nothing, and I want you to be surprised. I want you to be taken aback by it. I want the focus of the attention of the audience to be on the fact that I can start from nothing and then gradually ease into the sound, or backwards, ease out of the sound into absolute nothingness, right? Because when you just throw this in here, there's all this other stuff going on. There's the melody here, and here there is the melody going on there, and so on. And here you have this niente fade in, and it is just a thrown away thing because the player will just be starting from very soft and then going into it anyways. But they're not really going to be starting from niente, especially an oboe player, right? Can double reeds play the same kind of, easing down to nothingness and coming back in and so on? Do they have that power? No, they don't. Right? So, although some people might say, well, oboes have like a tongueless attack and so on, but I mean that's not the same thing as a clarinet niente attack and release, right? So really, it is kind of thrown away here, and like the player may just end up like just ignoring this and just fading in on a triple P anyways, right? So really, don't do this. Do not use niente dynamics, niente fade-ins and fade-outs unless you really have got the audience's attention on that part of the music. This part of the music right here is something you want to especially have them hear as they fade in. And of course, like the context of this passage is not, right? Nobody's going to be noticing that this fades in. So just start with a triple P, with pianissimo, all right? All right. Okay. But let's go back to this. Boom, you go at the beginning, right? You have this, and look at all the dynamic mixing you've got here. You got mezzo piano, forte piano, piano, and there's just all these different, mezzo forte. You've got all of these different dynamics. So I feel like, I mean, I see what you're trying to do here. You're saying, well, okay, well, strings are the softest, right? And then we've got like we've got these winds in here. I just want them to go oomph, and then here, like the brass and the bassoons, they're like the most powerful elements here, so I want them to be softer. But like, it's completely unnecessary to do this. Everybody could just go, you could just have everybody marked piano, piano marcato accent, and then the melody instruments and strings could be forte piano, right? It's just try to make it more uniform. And then here, like if you were going to go pow here, nobody's going to hear the harp. Doesn't matter. You have this beautiful gushing roll, but by the time these instruments go forte piano diminuendo, the glowing sound of the harp won't be heard anyway. So here is where you should start your harp. What's going on here? I see. Pianissimo, comma dolce. You don't need a comma, right? It just needs the comma is understood, right? It's better to have something like this or like like that. Okay, it's just cleaner. Okay. Yeah. So you have these beautiful ethereal effects here. You have just really wonderful lines here, the contrary motion, and yeah, I mean, I think it's all worked out beautifully, and I love the tempo of it, and the pressure, and everything else. And I don't know if you really need to go crescendo to forte in some instruments and mezzo piano and others, and so on. And then here you've got this niente fade out. Okay, the instrument is just going to fade out niente anyways, right? So all you have to do is just go like this. Oopsies, sorry. Is go, sorry, like this, right? So you don't need this, right? And this is functionally what's happening there, right? So just let it fade away. Like the player has no control over this. Let's go back to the way you scored this. Okay, so the player has absolutely no control over whether this fades off into silence or not within this given amount of time, right? They can't make it fade faster, right? So they have absolutely no control here. So just really what you functionally you need is this, right? Okay. All right. So yeah, I don't want to get too bogged down with the details. But yeah, I mean, it's a lovely intro. I've spent half of this talking about the intro, but just because you have so many wonderful features about it. Now here we get into, like, we have trumpet and flugelhorn, and you sort of have the here you have a duet. So you're having a trumpet and a flugelhorn playing a duet with the clarinet here at mezzo forte dolce, and then crescendo to forte. So by the time you get to here, going up to this G, this will outweigh everything else going on. The flute, the clarinet right in here, the bassoon at the octave right here with the which is kind of teaming up with the viola, and so it's this is kind of strange right in here. You've got and the second violin. So you've got this, and the harp. See, so like this harp is completely going to be swallowed by the force of what's going on here in your in this melody. So yeah, it's just almost better just to have like a single trumpet here, or just have a single flugelhorn playing right in here, or maybe a flugelhorn doubling up with the clarinet and so on. But like right in here, pushing up to the high register against these other instruments, you really are just in danger of the trumpet being the only thing really heard here. At forte, you have all these other parts right in here, mezzo piano, they're really in the background and so on. And while it sounds fine in the mock-up, it really is, in real life, it is going to be kind of obliterated, right? And it's a shame because you have all of this, this really lovely stuff going on here. You have a counter melody built into it, and a bunch of other stuff. And I feel that that's all pretty effective. Yeah. But one little thing here, and that is against all of this, all of this other stuff going on, the flute part right in here is just going to be buried, and it is not going to supply very much tone weight to the violins here. It would be better an octave higher, doubling the first violins, right? Because otherwise it just really is contributing almost nothing in this register, right? Okay. But let's play fair, okay? So evaluation criteria. Melody starting with elegance, I think so. I think that your basic plan is correct here, but it's just the blending of it, the realities of it is that it's really going to just end up being a big trumpet fest, right? Then natural transition to octaves, that's also very well done. If a little overpowered on top. If there had been like horn supporting what was going on here in the bassoons, like is this a bassoon or is this first bassoon or is this two bassoons, or you're a little inconsistent with, like, here you say a due, but is this a due? And then here there's this trap, right, that is built into Sibelius. Sibelius doesn't tell you that this is actually just a quarter rest, right? It gives the person a bar rest. So reading this bar rest, which is supposed to be a pickup, they might end up counting wrong, and then they enter with this entrance like 3 beats late, right? So really make sure to fix this trap, this horrible trap that is built into it. It's Sibelius giving you everything that you possibly could ever ask for, except that you're not asking for that, right? There's like no default to keep you from making that horrible error. And the same thing is true here. Like, you can't really give this a bar rest. This should be like, maybe two eighth rests, or just like another quarter rest, right? So we have the same problem on the other side of the half bar, right? Okay, all right. So not to get into it too much. So that sort of leaves the question of, is there a natural flow? And I really love this sort of da 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 kind of triplet thing going on here with the bassoons, and then the violas doing this pattern and so on. And I feel this all works really, really nicely. It's great. And does it expand without clogging up? It does. In fact, like as I said before, there's a risk here of the trumpet and flugelhorn, a duet, right? Like, there's a risk of them going into their high register here up to this G, kind of overpowering all of the beautiful things that you have worked out here. Now, going forwards, the next question is, does this contrast with the theme? It does, but remember what I said about the problem of just using clarinet for everything, and then like the feeling or the sound of the clarinet kind of gets into everything. And so that it doesn't really feel like there's a contrast, right? But like, to the extent that this is dominated anyways by trumpet and flugelhorn, to the detriment of the individuality of these other timbres, then I would say, starting here, with the clarinet, then yeah, absolutely, it's just, it's a solo. I would possibly mark all of these little snippets here like solos. So, here we've got dum dum, and then bum 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 bum, and then that's answered by oboe and English horn a duet. So just so long as you are, like, you remember what I've spoken of several times about a duet with oboe family instruments, is that you end up with a very trumpet-like sound, right? Because the players they cannot have that sort of fine sense of nuance anymore that they would normally have in solo playing. When they have to play a duet together, then they have to really control things so that they can match perfectly, right? And that results in a, like I keep saying, trumpet-like sound. So it just has a very kind of more baroque kind of a sound. And if it's off a little bit, but I completely don't agree with this. Why is this forte and that is mezzo piano? Right? You're just saying, well, I just want a little bit of the English horn color. No. Just, make them both mezzo forte or something, all right? Yeah. And this is lovely. So emphatic color of line. I mean, absolutely. If you got this trumpet, I mean, I'm assuming this is still a duet. So trumpet and flugelhorn plus clarinet in here. Yeah, and then like I said before, you've got the the counter melody in here, and that all adds to the harmonic density along with these like triplets in here and so on, and just regular transcription of the left hand piano part, and it beautifully leads forward to this right in here. But I mean, I just have a problem once again with the mixing of this is like that. Look, you have to understand something, Alexander. Like, as beautiful and incredible as the score is, you cannot treat dynamics like a mixing board because the players don't know that the guy sitting next to them is 1 degree softer than them, or 2 degrees louder, right? They don't know that, so it's better to have textures that naturally mix themselves at the same dynamic, right? Rather than this person being forte and that person's mezzo piano and this person's mezzo forte and so on and so forth, right? It's better to have them really have more unified dynamics that just mix because of the way they are. I mean, look at this. Like, here you've got a double bass at piano, like an octave below the tuba, right? So it's just kind of thrown away. And then here we've got mezzo forte, bass clarinet playing the same notes and so on, and then here we have, like, this is completely thrown away. This blending here with the cello is because of this is just because of the protuberance of the tuba's dynamic in here, and of course we're still at forte here with our trumpet and flugelhorn. So really, I mean, this whole thing should have pushed forward to mezzo forte in all parts, right? And then you would have, I would I'd be willing to bet that maybe the color would be a little different than you planned, but the sound would be just gorgeous. And of course, like, nobody can hear this harp. So like for instance here, an octave higher, this would stand out, but it's where it is, it's a kind of a throwaway. And then you have the same problem here that you had back here, and that is that the harp is just not strong enough to deal with these forte marcato accents, right? It really kind of takes things over. But I mean, having said that, I just really love the way that this is like more symphonic than it is like a back and forth. Da 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 bum bum da 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 bum bum is the approach right in the piano part. But here you just like really make it more of a kind of like a symphonic moment, right? And I feel like there's a lot of strength right in here. I love the idea of the repeated triplets here, and then like the melodic triplets there, and these leading to those right in there, and the staccato against the melodicity of the strings and so on. I really think that this is just really fun writing. There are some things that I probably would straighten out with you, if this were an orchestration coaching session. But there's a lot to be said for this, and I feel it's a really strong score. So if I've been really picky about certain bits, it's not that I don't like it. It's that I see a lot of promise in it, and I'm really anxious that you not allow certain certain easy errors to trip you up at this stage of your progress. Okay, so but I mean, just really a fine effort and a beautiful sounding mock-up, and just really, one that is definitely going to stick with me for quite a while. So thanks so much for entering this into this year's challenge. So that just leaves one more score in this compilation of scores. So let's take a look at it now. That's a beautifully noble and speaking with finality kind of entry there, Liam, if you will pardon my mangled syntax. Yeah, I mean, just really lovely. You probably noticed how I joined your pages together here, just to make like one single page that's sort of easier to read, and also sort of reduce the height and so on. Yeah, I mean, see if you can, like, next time you enter your piece, see if you can get it to be this layout. But if you can't, like, there are options, as you can see. All right. So, just like I was reminding Alexander in the last score of this compilation, yeah, just really make sure that you don't end up with bar rests in a half bar, right? Same thing here, right? Because this will be misinterpreted as being 2 bars long, right? Or excuse me, two 2 beats long, and then this will be misinterpreted as being 4 beats long, right? Rather than what it should be is a quarter rest, right? So anyway, yeah. So all that aside, that really lovely entry, and I mean, there's a lot. I think, like, if you listened once again to the previous entry, how much Alexander took pains in the mock-up to sort of drag things out, to sort of have this retardando and have like a bit of a pull here, not just at the end of the bar, but also like at the beginning, you know. Yeah, there. I mean, you could have even put, like, rather than put a fermata here, you could put it right here. Da 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 da. Put the turn back in, right? Da 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 da. So I mean, there are ways of making it more, or just really easy ways of making it more dramatic. Okay, so the overall plan here, in terms of the Divisi second violins, and then the first violins having the melody, and everything being, within the within the range of the piano part, as as scored, right, rather than extending it to octaves and so on. I mean, it's all an option, and you probably notice, like, it keeps everything very, very very intimate sounding, and also, of course, like the matching up the violas and the firsts together. That's a beautiful sound. One thing I think that you sort of missed out on, a just real obvious opportunity here, was to add some slurs, right? So you could have, like, that way, like, it's the way that it's scored right now, it just is a bunch of up and down bows, right? So you could have had a pattern like this. So da da slur, da slur, da 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 slur, da, right? And here, I think, rather than going da da, go da da da, right? That's what Beethoven. Beethoven does not have a tie here, right? So I think you're missing the idea of the da 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 da, right? It's got to have a da da rather than just da. So yeah, so basically that would end up with a pattern like this: down bow, up bow, down bow, up bow, down bow, up bow, down bow, and then up bow right at the end, right? So I mean, that's just easier, all things considered. So anyhow, and then, of course, just like bringing in the cellos as the octave instrument below this. I mean, it's an intriguing idea, and I think it, like, works out in the end. But it does make the melody pretty heavy, but it's still all right. So, does it set the mood effectively for what's to come? I think so, because, like, you're going for a certain kind of simplicity, right? You are, you're not necessarily scoring for, for period instruments here, like in your like natural horns and trumpets. That's obviously totally out the window with some of the choices you're making here, just overall, the character of it and so on. You're not really taking any pains, so that's perfectly fine. And then, of course, you're adding harp, which is more of, like Berlioz forward, right, kind of orchestral instrument. So that's all cool. I actually feel that this has more of kind of a middle 19th century character to it, right? I think it's, yeah, kind of something more sort of more like Schumann, right? Like kind of later Schumann, early Brahms, you know, possibly even looking forward a little bit, to the 1860s, 1870s. So, one thing I would say, just watch out about falling into the same strategy over and over again, right? So, like, for instance, here we've got, like, we set this up with violas and firsts unison, and then with the cellos an octave lower, right? And then here, like, we go into the same exact setup, right? With the horn doubling the cello part. And I just feel it's just a little too much of the same thing, right? But like the way that you frame everything in here is done really beautifully. Now your mock-up is telling you that your harp part plays a role here, and it sounds fantastic. But I have to tell you that your mock-up is lying to you. To make this really sound effective, I think you would have to take the dynamic up to forte, and you would have to boost the range of the harp part up an octave, right? And then you would get a realistic idea of how this would sound. Like essentially, you're just basically kind of doubling the second violin and clarinet part, right? But I mean, it has a beautiful sound to it, right? I don't want to knock it. I mean, that like, if you were to do some balancing here, right? Let's say that like instead of thinking of this as mezzo forte, you kind of held off on your strong dynamics until here, right? Let's assume that you did that, and everything started at piano, right? And you just like said, well, I'm gonna find the beauty in the piano dynamic, right? So it's gonna be piano, and we'll just let that be the general feeling of it, right? And then you could leave your harp where it is at mezzo forte, and it would sound fine, right? So that's an example of how that could work. All right, and so just being aware that like this will be very firm, like the way that you've got this the pizzicato double basses and the tuba, right? It's just gonna that tuba under there is just really going to make this pizzicato be incredibly firm, right? Maybe more than you want. In which case, I would say like, well, if you do similar things like this in your own scoring, and it gets played, and you run into that, then obviously, what was the solution? What should it have been is like contrabassoon, right? Then you get that perfect blend that isn't too heavy. All right, but let's not get tied up in that. Does the melody start with elegance? I would say yes, it does. Right? Like even though it doesn't contrast with what happened before, there's enough of a different element here in the timbre with the horn to set it apart a little bit. Right? I mean, maybe not enough, for a picky guy like me, but still. And this is really lovely. The staccato clarinet and unison second violins and so on, and the harp. I think that it all works fine. So, is there a natural transition to octaves? Yes. I mean, I feel it's once again beautifully done. If kind of baked in, right? That's the problem. It's sort of baked into the strategy. So, it's not surprising that it works. This is really lovely, though. The adding on the second flute part here. Now, I see why you are having this be second flute, because you're sort of saving the first flute for this job here. And, that is telling me more that, like, that it's not so much that this should be second flute, it's more that this shouldn't be flute, right? If you are getting to the point where you kind of have to set up a contrast going forwards, right? Because the proper thing to do would just let this be all first flute, right? That I would rather trust this to the first flute, because I don't know where the score is going. Is it going to be played by a semi-pro orchestra or a community orchestra or a student orchestra where the second player has just basically not even looked at their music, right? So I'd rather trust this to the first, no insult to seconds at all. They would completely understand with this and say, yeah, I mean, that's like that kind of thing. Unless it was Adue, probably would be the first job, right? Okay. So, do you expand without clogging up? Yeah, yeah. So it's nice. I really love the role of the bassoons right in here. I feel it keeps it on track. All right, so that's all good. Now, does it contrast with the theme? When you go to this, right? So I mean, I feel it's like too much in the flute, right? Although you sort of do your work here, like with having the violas playing an octave lower, and I mean that is such a great idea. Like, in fact, I just released a little tip at the end of last month about how the how viola and flute in octaves has just a wonderful sound, because the violas, the sort of irregularity of their resonance compared to the more idealized violins means that they leave room in their overtones for the flute to play without necessarily being obtruded upon or being sucked up by the lower instrument and so on. And they also have like a wonderful character. So this, you absolutely have captured that here, right? Now look, be careful. Like, let's say you've got the second part in here, then you throw in the first part. The first player has absolutely no idea that the dynamic here is mezzo forte. So if you're going to do this two-part writing, drop in a little mezzo forte up here, okay? All right, so so you see, like, I'm just like not even sure that this is enough of a contrast here, right? But then, like, see here, you say, well, I'm coming in with my oboes here, and then you have the oboe, the second player of the oboe, take over and go bum. So I mean, as a strategy, with support from below from the cellos and so on, more or less works. I just feel that, like, overall, like, it is the cello that, like, the cello as the support instrument is defining the response, right? Rather than the second player of each pair of winds, right? So I just feel that, like, in terms of the contrast, you're running a bit of a risk there, right? That's just, to my mind. And here I feel that the harp is really not playing much of a role at all. But this is kind of cool. The clarinet and the second violin, I feel that's working pretty well, right? And and that just answers the question: harmonic support needed. And well, I mean, yeah, you sort of threw that in. Okay. All right. So now we get into the next question: emphatic color of line. Absolutely. Right, with the Adue flutes and the first violins, I really love the fact that you have committed, you have absolutely decided to go staccato here with all these parts, so that like really kind of helps clear up a lot of things. And same thing with the oboes and the violas and so on. Yeah, and then of course, like the seconds and firsts all working together, and so on. It just really is going to have a scorching sound. The second trumpet right in here, and the horn, the third horn, and so on. I mean, it all locks together nicely. Okay, here's your problem though. Okay, you are by putting in this sort of anticipating tonic right in here. Like throwing in the upcoming tonic here of F, you are ruining the whole idea of the leading tone here and the dominant seventh, right? So like we kind of can't hear the dominant seventh effect of the harmony it's sort of like these tonic notes of the one here is messing up with the identity of the cadence, right? It's just like the cadence doesn't know how to cadence with the way that you've scored it, right? So, I mean, what's the solution? Well, rather than just repeating the sounding note of F, right, of our F major chord that we're going to coming up, you could go for a note that is more in line, is like it represents one of the pitches, like so this, for instance, this could drop from sounding F to E, right? So you have the third of the dominant seven chord, right? or you could go up one step to like a sounding G, right? So that would be like the dominant of the dominant seventh, the fifth of the dominant seventh chord. So that was like the one thing that just kind of spoiled things a little bit, right? Is the fact that I mean I completely understand that sort of da 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 kind of thing. It's almost like heralding this big cadence, but in the act of heralding the cadence, it is ruining the cadence, like the simplicity of it. Now, look, I mean, if you are happy throwing the cadence for a loop, I am totally with you there. I don't care, right? But in terms of the effect that you're trying to build here of an emphatic entrance of the one here, following the inherent feeling of the C7 chord, then we have to make the C7 more C7thy, right? And take away the F. All right. Theory lesson over. Just in terms of the orchestration, emphatic color of line, I've already answered that. Harmonic density is great, except for, as I mentioned before, but very simple elements. And I feel it leads beautifully forwards to this, and you're maintaining the strength. You're just going, crescendo here. What if you had done this? What if this had stayed piano, but expressive, right? Piano espressivo. And then this had been like mezzo piano or mezzo forte. And then this part here had started piano, like just drop back to piano and then push forward to forte, right? Then I think you get more dynamic contrast, right? Rather than just kind of being sort of sitting around lukewarm for most of the piece, right? So it's just like mezzo forte is lukewarm, right? So it doesn't, it starts to get hot here, right? And then you've been almost hot for the entire 6 bars or so on, and then we get to the forte. So it's just like, really, there's like nothing all that startling about the forte when you get here. But let's say that you're piano with a bit of flex in it. Then here you notch it up a little bit to mezzo piano, maybe even mezzo forte, for the solo lines anyways, and then drop back down to piano. Then you have somewhere to go, right? Rather than just mezzo forte to forte, it's lukewarm to warm, right? Anyways, this is really nicely done. I think that, like, if you're going to go bum, 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 and then answer it with dun, dun, you should go dun, 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 right? I think this is, like, you've got to keep the call and response thing happening. Well, I mean, if that doesn't feel right to you, that's fine with me. It's not poorly orchestrated or anything. And I love this, like, diving B flat down here with the first and second. And violas and everybody, I guess. But yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, and then that just allows the winds and brass to kind of take point here on this B flat chord. Yeah, I mean, it's just very charming and as noble as all hell, right? Trill is a little outmoded. I think that if you're not going to stick to sort of period practice with the rest of your score, you can just make a triple beam tremolo here and just make it a more typical kind of notation, right? So yeah, so anyway, that's my evaluation of your score. And there, just like with previous evaluations, there's probably a lot more, especially in this section here, that I could have worked out with you, and little bits and pieces of voicings that we could adjust here and there. But overall, it's a great conception and a pretty damn good execution. And that's true for so many of the entries in this particular compilation. And and just really great efforts by everybody, and it just really makes me feel so optimistic about everybody's artistry and commitment to their craft and improvement. In the case of some orchestrators I've seen coming through these challenges, just getting better and better and wiser and more like they're just like ears improving and sense of proportion, and and then just like the lovely coloration of certain things, just tiny little decisions made that that are so different from everybody else's and yet have so much character. So yeah, I you know I yes, I do have more to say about the staccato against the slurs and so on, and whether or not this is effective. But like I can't spend any more time on it, Liam. I think that you did a great job here, and there's and I'm just feel so blessed, kind of getting up and sitting down in front of all these scores and working through them with you, and it's I always get just such a positive feeling after I have looked at people's scores and passed along some advice, and it's really what the group is all about at the core, right? So thanks everybody, and yeah, over the next few weeks, probably there will be like one or two of these compilations through to the end of the year. All right. Everybody's done a great job. Thanks again, everybody, and look for the next compilation coming up next weekend.